Welcome to our spooky adventure. Today, we're exploring the creepy world of demon possession. Imagine a dark and scary force taking over someone's body and making them act in really frightening ways. In this video, we'll tell you 3 spine-chilling stories about people who had terrifying encounters with demons. These stories are full of strange and spooky events that will give you goosebumps. Thank you for watching Craving Fear. We need your support to continue delivering stories and improve. If you haven't yet, like this video and subscribe for more content. Are you ready to be scared? Let's begin. I remember the old woman who lived in our village when I was just a child. She was a strange, unsettling figure, and I've never forgotten her eerie presence. She lived in a crumbling house at the edge of the village, surrounded by a garden that was nothing but rotting soil and dead branches. There wasn't a single plant that dared to grow in her yard. The air around her place was thick with decay. People whispered that she had made a terrible deal with the devil. They said she sold her soul because she practiced black magic and worshipped the devil. I never understood what exactly black magic was, but I knew it was something that made people scared. The old woman never spoke to anyone, and when she walked through the village, her eyes had this strange, blank stare. She looked like a ghost from another world, skinny and dressed in ragged clothes that barely covered her. I remember one particular night, my grandparents were telling me about her. They said that sometimes people would see her standing by the river under the pale moonlight, talking to someone invisible. The whole village would shiver with fear just thinking about it. I felt a chill run down my spine whenever I heard these stories, but the worst part was still to come. When the old woman died, the whole village was in shock. It was as if her death was the final piece of a dark puzzle that no one wanted to solve. Her house, which was already falling apart, seemed to fall into a more sinister disrepair. The villagers were afraid but felt they had to do what was necessary. They went to her house to remove her body, but when they tried to move her, something horrifying happened. Her body was stuck to the floor. It was like her very being was glued down, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't lift her. I remember hearing about it from my grandparents. They said the scene was ghastly. The villagers had to pry up the floorboards to get her out. The sound of the boards creaking and splintering filled the night air, mixing with the fear and sadness of the people. I can still picture the horror in my mind. The thought of a body being so firmly attached to the ground that it seemed to belong there forever. The next day, after her body was removed, something even more dreadful happened. The old woman's house caught fire. Flames roared up into the sky, and everyone in the village heard the screams coming from inside. It wasn't just the crackling of burning wood. It was as if the screams were coming from the very walls. They were haunting and filled with pain, sending shivers down everyone's spine. I was too young to fully understand what was happening, but I could feel the fear in the air. My grandparents told me that people were terrified to go near the burning house. The fire seemed to have a life of its own, dancing and flickering in a way that was almost alive. The flames twisted and turned as if they were feeding on something more than just the wood and walls. As I got older, I learned more about the old woman and the rumors surrounding her. They said she had lived a long life full of dark practices, and that her soul was forever trapped in the darkness she had embraced. It was believed that when she died, she was not free but rather bound to the house and the land she had cursed. Her death was not the end of her torment, it was merely the beginning of a new kind of horror. The villagers never spoke much about her after that day. Her house was eventually rebuilt, but no one wanted to live there. It stood empty for years, a constant reminder of the fear and darkness that had once taken over our small village. Every time I walked past that house, I couldn't help but feel a cold shiver run down my spine. The stories and the horror of what had happened lingered in the air like a ghostly presence. Even now, whenever I think back to those times, I feel a deep sense of unease. The old woman's story has become a part of my childhood nightmares. I remember the blank stare in her eyes, the way her body was stuck to the floor, and the horrifying screams that filled the night. It was a chapter in our village's history that no one wanted to relive, yet it remains etched in my memory. When I worked at a Catholic school, I saw something so terrifying that it still haunts me to this day. It all began with a student named Emily. From the moment she joined our school, she was always challenging everything about our faith. She questioned every lesson and disrupted classes, which made many of us uneasy. But no one could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. One day during a regular class, Emily suddenly collapsed. Her fall was so abrupt that it took us all by surprise. We rushed to her side, but when she came to, something was horribly wrong. Her eyes were glowing a deep, fiery red, and she was foaming at the mouth. It was like she had become someone else entirely. The room fell silent, filled with a mix of fear and confusion. We quickly carried her back to her dormitory, hoping it was just a bad episode. But things got much worse when we reached her room. Inside, it was like stepping into another world. The walls were lined with books about demons and dark magic. There were grimoires, ancient books on summoning spirits, and rituals that should never be touched. It was clear that Emily had been involved in something very dark and dangerous. The atmosphere in the room felt thick, almost as if the darkness was alive. When Emily woke up, she was back to her normal self, but she had no memory of what had happened. It was as if a dark force had taken over her and then disappeared, leaving her confused and frightened. The change in her was unsettling. It was like something had been living inside her, and now it was gone, but its presence still lingered. The staff and I were terrified. We had to make a difficult decision. Emily had to leave the school. We couldn't risk anyone else being affected by the darkness she had brought with her. Even though it was heartbreaking, we had to protect the other students and ourselves from whatever evil had touched Emily. The days that followed were heavy with dread. The school, once a place of learning and safety, now felt oppressive and dark. I remember walking through the hallways, feeling an unseen weight pressing down on me. Every creak of the old building seemed amplified, and shadows seemed to move out of the corner of my eye. The dread was so intense it felt like the darkness Emily had experienced was seeping into the walls of our school. One night, I was alone in my office, trying to distract myself from the fear that had settled in my chest. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang coming from Emily's old room. My heart pounded as I hesitantly went to check. The door creaked open, and I was hit with a cold, almost suffocating air. The room was exactly as it had been, but the eerie feeling was stronger than ever. I felt a chill run down my spine as I noticed strange symbols scratched into the walls. Symbols I was sure were not there before. They seemed to pulse with a dark energy, almost as if they were alive. I had to leave the room, my fear almost paralyzing me. The next day, the atmosphere at the school felt even heavier. The staff and students were on edge, and many of us had trouble sleeping. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my dreams filled with red eyes and the sound of faint, menacing whispers. Months passed, and Emily was never heard from again. I hoped she managed to escape the darkness that had drawn her in, but I couldn't shake the fear that something might have followed her. The school had a dark reputation after that, and it was no longer a place of peace. Many of us who had been there that day felt as if a part of the darkness had attached itself to us. The fear of the unknown lingered, a constant reminder that some things are better left undisturbed. That experience taught me a crucial lesson. There are forces in this world that should never be tampered with. Some things are better left alone, and the darkness that Emily had touched was a reminder of the dangers that lurk just beyond the edge of our understanding. Even now, as I look back on that horrifying time, I can't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. It reminds us how close we came to something truly evil, and how some shadows are best left in the dark. When I first moved into the old house on Maple Street, I had no idea I was stepping into a nightmare. The house was charming, but there was something unsettling about it. The real trouble began with an antique mirror I found in the attic. It was beautiful, but had an eerie, dark aura around it. I was curious, so I decided to hang it in my living room, not knowing the horror it would unleash. One night, as I was alone, I noticed the mirror seemed to flicker oddly. I was drawn to it and felt compelled to look closer. That's when I saw a strange Latin phrase inscribed on the frame. I couldn't help but recite the words out loud, even though they felt wrong on my tongue. The moment I spoke to them, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The room grew colder, and I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. In the days that followed, I started to feel watched, like someone was always lurking in the shadows. At first, it was just small things, doors creaking, strange noises at night. But soon, the nightmares began. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, seeing dark shapes moving in the mirror's reflection. Each time, the whispering got louder, urging me to find someone else to help. One night, I was sitting in my living room when I saw my own reflection in the mirror change. It wasn't me anymore. It was a ghostly version of myself, with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. It spoke to me in a voice that wasn't mine. It told me I had to bring someone else to the mirror to perform the ritual, or I would be trapped forever. I felt a paralyzing fear, realizing the mirror was not just a mirror. It was a prison for a malevolent demon. The more I resisted, the more the demon tormented me. It started showing me visions of terrifying scenes, people being dragged into the mirror screaming for help. Each night, the whispers grew more insistent, and the reflections in the mirror became more horrific. I would see shadows moving behind me, and I would turn around to find nothing there. My sanity was slipping away as I felt the demon's presence more strongly each day. Desperate to escape, I tried to break the mirror, but it was as if it was made of steel. Each attempt only seemed to make the demon angrier. I could see it becoming more restless, more determined to get its way. It was clear that the mirror was not just a cursed object, but a gateway for something far more sinister. Then came the day I felt I had no choice but to try and convince someone else to perform the ritual. I didn't want to do it, but the demon's influence was overpowering. I found a friend who had come over to visit. I told them about the mirror, trying to sound casual, but the fear in my voice must have been obvious. They laughed it off, thinking it was just a prank. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a knock on my door. It was my friend, looking pale and scared. They told me they'd seen something horrifying in the mirror and wanted to leave. I was torn, but I knew what I had to do. I forced them to look into the mirror and recite the Latin words, hoping it would appease the demon and buy me some time. As they spoke, the mirror's surface rippled, and a dark, shadowy figure emerged. The next morning, my friend was gone, and all I could find were strange, eerie symbols in their room. The mirror had claimed them, just as it had claimed so many others. The demon's torment continued, now more intense than ever. It would show me visions of my friend trapped in the mirror, forever screaming. I felt trapped in my own home, with no way to escape the curse. The mirror's surface seemed to pulse with a life of its own, always watching, always waiting for the next victim. I was now a part of the demon's cruel game, doomed to find more souls to feed its hunger. The fear of the mirror consumed my life, and I was driven to the brink of madness. Each day was a struggle, trying to resist the demon's whispers and prevent it from claiming more victims. The mirror remained a constant, haunting presence in my life, a reminder of the horrors I had unleashed and the darkness that would never let me go. As I sit here writing this, I realize there is no escape. The mirror's curse will continue, feeding off the souls of those who dare to look into it and utter the forbidden words. The demon's power is unending, and its thirst for new victims will never be quenched. I am left with the chilling knowledge that the mirror is a doorway to hell, and I am forever bound to its darkness. If you enjoyed our eerie tales and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Share your thoughts and let us know what you think in the comments below. If you have interesting stories, email them at the address in the video description. We'd love to hear them, and I'll make it into a video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.